Dr. Miller-Meeks from Iowa for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Dr. and Chair Winstrup. I will be signing on to the letter just as an aside, so thank you for that. And I want to thank my colleague on the other side of the aisle, Dr. Barra, for his comments as well. Almost 2 years ago, we had a hearing, this committee had a hearing into the origins of COVID-19. Unfortunately, it was only attended by Republicans. But at the press conference following that hearing, I could tell that people were thinking of this as a partisan issue. And why it's critically important that we understand COVID-19 origins is to prevent future outbreaks and global pandemics, precisely that. And why? One is that we know that there was a lack of disclosure. We know that international health regulations require 24 hours notice. And certainly, we were not notified of this until late January, even though I think the evidence points to the virus circulating in the fall of 2019. We need to know, as previously mentioned, because of biosafety laboratory research. Is there research being conducted? We understand, even in the best laboratories, there can be leaks. But Biosafety Lab 4 work was occurring in a Biosafety Lab 2. And the international community has a vested interest in both disclosure and that the proper type of research is occurring in the proper biosafety lab. And then 4, as previously mentioned again, and I think needs to be underscored, the ethics of the type of research that is being performed. This is not a Republican issue. It is not a Democrat issue. It is not a United States issue. It is an international issue, and the international health organizations have a vested interest in disclosure immediately, in biosafety lab, and in the ethics of research. And Mr. Ratcliffe, I want to thank you for testifying before the subcommittee this morning and supporting our investigation into the origins of COVID-19. When the former CDC director, Dr. Redfield, testified before this committee last month, he stated that when you look at the two departments, the FBI and the Energy Department, they have the strongest scientific footprint of any of our intelligence agencies. And I think the way they got to the answers of low probability and moderate probability is their internal scientists did the science. And there are some in the media especially who insinuate that a low probability or moderate probability means no probability. With your background and experience as the Director of National Intelligence, can you elaborate on the scientific expertise within the Department of Energy and the FBI and why their conclusions on COVID-19 origins would be noteworthy and it doesn't mean not probable?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. So from initial starting standpoint, as has been talked about, some agencies haven't made any assessment at any confidence level. When assessments are made, they can be made at a low confidence level, they can be made at a moderate confidence level, or they can be made at a high confidence level. And in this case, you referenced the moderate and low confidence levels that the FBI and the Department of Energy respectively have made. Those are based on scientific information, and none of this is political. None of this is disputed. There is currently no environmental source identified for COVID-19. There is no intermediate host that has ever been identified. There is no reservoir species that has ever been identified. And COVID-19 was never known to exist in any animal or species before the pandemic began. Those are scientific facts that are not disputed, and there's nothing political about that. That factored into the determinations that have been made. And what I talked about before about this shift taking place, the things that I just related, early on, the intelligence community was briefed by various scientists who said, those answers will come. They referenced SARS-1 and MERS outbreaks and saying, look, it may take several months, even a year, sometimes even longer to identify an intermediate host or a species. We're now at 3.5 years, and every day that passes makes it less likely that there's anything that will ever tie this to nature, whereas on the other side of the ledger, it's overwhelming when you look at China's actions and the circumstances surrounding what was going on from a biosafety standpoint at Wuhan, the massive number of coronaviruses, the massive numbers of bats carrying coronaviruses that were brought into Wuhan, all of that weighs heavily into making assessments at some confidence level that a lab leak was the origin for this pandemic.
So it sounds like that you would consider the opinions of these components to be taken seriously, and I would say that in reference to the letter from the Chinese embassy, that at minimal, the WHO now recognizing its earlier mistakes would diminish the influence of the Chinese Communist Party within the WHO. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.